What would you do if you know that you are going to turn up late for work? Think of an excuse? Prepare an apology? Or start a revolution, overthrow the oppressive system, establish your own dynasty, and build an empire that will be remembered as one of the golden ages of China? Well, if you are Liu Bang, the founder of the Han Dynasty, then there could only be one answer. Run the heck away! But unfortunately, luck and destiny conspired to keep this peasant-born small-town sheriff away from an idyllic life. And this is the story of how he lucked and conned his way upwards into becoming an emperor. Here is the background of the political situation of the time period. Before China was unified in the year 221 before Common Era, it was made up of a collection of disparate states. When Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, conquered them, he exterminated their royal families and incorporated those states into his empire under his central control. He standardized writing, currency, and measurement, improving the economy, and undertook great projects that left lasting marks in history. However, it all came at the cost of countless innocent lives. He was a totalitarian despot, but a highly functional one. He kept a tight leash over his conquered land by frequently visiting them on his grand inspection tours. Cheer! That's how a great man should be! That's what Liu Bang exclaimed when he saw the imperial convoy while serving as a corvée laborer. Wow! Back to work, laborer! Okay. Meanwhile, on the other side of the empire, a completely different sentiment emanated from a young man with an impressive build. One day, I will replace him. Shush! Be quiet! You will get us all killed! That young man was Xiang Yu, the man who will one day be the arch-nemesis of Liu Bang. Heroic, impulsive, and proud. Xiang Yu is the diametric opposite of Liu Bang in every way possible. His aristocratic clan had served as generals for the state of Chu for many generations, and the destruction of the Chu royal family and his clan fueled his obsessive hatred for everything Qin. Yet, to his uncle Xiang Liang's dismay, his drive for vengeance did not carry over to his study of reading, writing, and swordplay. I can write my own name, that's enough. With swordplay, I can only fight one man. But what he said next lit his uncle up. I want to learn how to fight 10,000. So his elated uncle taught him the art of war. Liu Bang, on the other hand, was a peasant-born small-town scoundrel from Pei County who had boundless charisma and a gift for making friends. One time, he came across an exclusive party with a 1,000-coin entry fee. He was able to bluff his way in by saying, I'll pledge 10,000 coins! And once he is in, he not only charmed his way out of paying the pledge, he even impressed the host so much, the host married his daughter off to him. So it is not a surprise that a street rat like him could somehow become the town sheriff. Yet he knew that he was destined for something greater. How did he know? Well, that was an omen. One day, when his mother was sleeping, suddenly the sky turned dark. Thunder crashed, lightning flashed, and the next thing they saw was a dragon that appeared next to her. Not long after that incident, she was found to be pregnant with him. If that wasn't a sign, then I don't know what it is. Well, it could be bull. Even if it is true, then it means that you're an illegitimate child. Ha ha! Shut up, Yongzi! I haven't got time for you. I need to deliver these convict laborers to work on Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum. Well, sometimes even his godly charms doesn't work, especially on village a-holes like Yongzi. On 209 BCE, 1 year after the death of Qin Shi Huang, his successor, Huhai, decreed that all counties must send their criminals to work on the mausoleum. But under the harsh rule of Qin's legalist ideology, almost anything can be considered a crime, and the punishment is always excessive. For example, if Liu Bang was even late on his delivery, he would be put to death along with the other convicts. And imagine what would happen to him if most of his prisoners escaped. I'm dead. If he reported that his prisoners escaped, he would be executed. And if he was late because he had to recapture them, the result would be the same anyway. So in the end, he just gave up. He started drinking and let the other prisoners go. 10 of them were so grateful to him, they decided to stay. To evade the authorities, they decided to hide in the wilderness of Mount Mangtang. But along the way, the scout reported that there was a huge white snake before their path. What? What the heck is a white snake doing in the middle of nowhere? Let me at it! Fueled by alcoholic rage, Liu Bang charged at the snake and cleaved it into two. The next morning, a passerby saw a crazy old woman crying next to the snake, uttering complete gibberish. She claimed that the snake was her son and the son of the White Emperor, who was killed by the son of the Red Emperor. When the passerby chanced upon Liu Bang's group and told them what he encountered, Liu Bang immediately chimed in. I know what it means! The son of the White Emperor means the Qin Empire. But the official color of the Qin Empire is black. White, black, what's the difference? They're all colors. And the son of the Red Emperor must be me. Oh, my favorite color is red. It's an omen, guys. We have to start a rebellion and overthrow the empire. We're gonna win. Yeah. And on that year, 209 BCE, a rebellion against Qin was started because a group of people were going to be late for work by Chen Sheng and Wu Guang. What? They stole my idea and they're even more successful than me. Chen Sheng and Wu Guang were in a similar predicament to Liu Bang, but their uprising was far more successful than his. They revived the former 5 states, and Chen Sheng claimed the throne of Chu for himself. Soon, other uprisings started to spring all across China, and local governors installed by the Qin central government was overthrown one by one. To the east, Xiang and his nephew Xiang Yu took the opportunity to secure the Wu region of Chu, and he personally killed over 100 of the governor's men during the coup. Then they raised an army of 8,000 warriors, and these men became his closest comrades until the end of their lives. With the help of his best friend Xiao He, Liu Bang also succeeded to overthrow the local governor. But now, seeing the chaos everywhere, he is starting to get cold feet and refused to become the new governor. It was too much responsibility. Not even Xiao He and his friends could get him to change his mind. So they settled this by divination. And when his name came up, he realized that he couldn't escape his destiny. To be honest, this kind of feigned refusal is a very popular charade used by leaders to bolster their followers' loyalty throughout Chinese history. So this event could just be one of Liu Bang's tricks again. Anyway, after this event, he raised the red flag and banners of the Red Emperor and gathered an army of 3,000. He also recruited Xiao He, his best buddy, Fan Kui, his brother-in-law, and all his other buddies to his cause. He even extended an olive branch to that a-hole Yongci by inviting him. It was an act he quickly regretted because he was backstabbed in record time, as the ungrateful snake locked him out of a city they conquered not long after the start of his campaign. You will pay for that! So Liu Bang requested help from the new king of Chu to teach his old enemy Yongci a lesson. Chen Sheng's ragtag band of rebels were too disorganized and was no match for the professionally led Qin army. Chen Sheng's campaign to the capital of Qin, Shenyang, was quickly crushed by the professional Qin general Zhang Han, and Chen Sheng himself was killed in action. So Liu Bang was on his way to meet the replacement. But this detour proved to be a godsend to Liu Bang because along the way he met Zhang Liang, a brilliant strategist who was also famous for his failed assassination attempt on Qin Shi Huang. They quickly hit it off, and impressed with Liu Bang as a person, he joined his cause, but only until he could revive the former state of Han, because he belonged to an aristocratic family of the state. In 208 BCE, while Liu Bang was working for the new king of Chu fending off the Qin army, Xiangliang's force moved west. Now that it had grown to tens of thousands, they easily defeated the king of Chu and installed their own puppet king, King Huhai. Returning from his assignment, Liu Bang was surprised to find that he had a new master. But seeing that they are eager to incorporate his force, he took the opportunity to make a teensy tiny request. So there is this a-hole called Yongzi, yeah? Let me tell you what he did. Borrowing the power of Xiangliang's army, Liu Bang smashed Yongzi's force and retook the city. But unfortunately, his old nemesis escaped to Wei. Well, at least Liu Bang got some semblance of revenge. But this episode demonstrated to them that Liu Bang was a petty man with small ambition, so they felt safe to have him around. During this period, Zhang Liang left Liu Bang to help the new king of Han recover his kingdom. But he had grown attached to Liu Bang, who he now considered to be his true master, and promised to return as soon as possible. With Zhang Liang gone, Liu Bang continued to work under Xiang Liang, along with Xiang Yu. And once again, his godly charms worked its magic on the impressionable young man. Xiang Yu grew to like Liu Bang so much they became sworn brothers. Liu Bang, being the older one, became the elder brother. Together, they brought the fight to the Qin general Zhang Han, who had besieged the city of Dong'e and defeated him. As Zhang Han's remaining force retreated westward, Xiang Liang, who carelessly broke away to pursue him, was caught in an ambush and killed. The main Chu force under him was also annihilated. After receiving the news of the death of his uncle, Xiang Yu was overcome with grief, and he swore bloody vengeance on Zhang Han. And this was the prelude to the decisive battle of Julu, the battle that marked the collapse of Qin. After regrouping, the Chu rebel coalition agreed that it was imperative to strike Qin right in its heart, the capital Shenyang. Otherwise, they will keep returning with more and more troops, led by professional generals like Zhang Han. If they don't do anything, it is a matter of time that Qin will eventually win. So they asked for volunteers for this critical mission. As reward, King Huai of Chu promised that the first general to enter the capital would be made the king of the Guangzhou region, which included the capital of Qin. Even with the promise of such tantalizing reward, among the many gathered rebel generals, only 2 were brave enough to step forward. And you guessed it, they were Liu Bang and Xiang Yu. But before a quarrel could start, a messenger brought in an urgent news. Zhang Han had returned, this time with a colossal army of 200,000 men, and he had besieged the city of Julu. The king of Zhao urgently needed help. Consumed by burning hatred for Zhang Han, Xiang Yu immediately turned his attention to his sworn enemy. But fearing that Xiang Yu was going to act impulsively, he was made second in command under another general. And so Liu Bang and Xiang Yu went their separate ways. When the rebel army from various states approached Julu, they were struck by the sheer size of the Qin army besieging the city, and nobody dared to cross the Yellow River and enter the fray. Even with the combined power of other rebel groups from other states, their number was nowhere near Zhang Han's. So all they did was watch from the distance. Xiang Yu, disgusted by their cowardice, became increasingly exasperated. Meanwhile, Liu Bang and his smaller army was taking detours along the way to Shenyang. On the road, he discovered the scattered army of Xiang Liang and collaborators who were willing to assist him. He also scored quite an impressive victory against Wang Li's army and sent him northwards to Zhang Han, bolstering his number and exacerbating the rebel forces' situation. He was even reunited with Zhang Liang, who came to his rescue in a skirmish. By 207 BCE, back at Xiangyu's side, after enduring 46 frustrating days of non-action, he finally snapped. He killed his commander and assumed direct control. The puppet king Huhai was unable to object. So without the support from other rebel groups, Xiangyu decided to launch an assault with his own army. He ordered his 2 generals to cross the river with their army of 20,000 first, before doing the same himself. Once he had crossed the river, he ordered his soldiers to smash their cooking pots and sink their boats. And his men were only allowed to carry 3 days' worth of rations. So they were left with no other choice but to win. This event was later turned into a Chinese idiom, breaking the pots and sinking the boats, which meant reaching a point of no return, which also had similar meaning to crossing the Rubicon. So with his men pushed to desperation, Xiangyu and his army fought like demons. It was said that each of them could take on 10 Qin soldiers, and defying all odds, they obliterated a good portion of the much larger Qin army. By the end of the battle, Julu was liberated, and Zhang Han and the remainder of his men was forced to hole up in a nearby city. Whoa! After witnessing this miraculous victory, the rebel leaders who were too scared to join the fight quickly rushed to Xiangyu's camp. And as soon as they saw him, the awestruck rebels fell to their knees and made him the supreme commander of their combined army. Meanwhile, a series of intrigues and coups had thrown the Qin court into chaos. Cao Cao, the corrupt eunuch who held the real power, refused to provide reinforcement for Zhang Han because he suspected that he was planning his own rebellion. So in the end, Zhang Han had no choice but to surrender to Xiangyu's force, and his remaining 200,000 soldiers became prisoners of war. Fearing blame for his mistake, Cao Cao killed the current emperor before he could be punished. In turn, he was murdered by the puppet ruler he installed. So when Liu Bang entered the gate of Shenyang, he was presented with a kingdom on a silver platter, as the new ruler of Qin decided to surrender without a fight. Lucky! As according to King Huai's promise, it is only a matter of time that he is announced the king of Guangzhong. As for his first display of magnanimity, he forbade his soldiers from looting and upheld the law and order of the city. Think about it. If he let people loot, he is practically letting them steal his stuff, since this is his city now. But while he basked in the opulence of the imperial capital of Qin and enjoyed its luxury, a few hundred miles away, Xiangyu caught wind of Liu Bang's entry into Shenyang. As he barreled down the road to the capital, he couldn't help but feel betrayed, because he was the one who made the most sacrifice in this war and shed the most blood. Now, these two sworn brothers are set on a devastating collision course that will change the history of China forever.
Snap out of it, bro! Look at the big picture!
Liu Bang was a peasant, and he got his vices. Lots of them actually. But luckily for him, he's got plenty of great buddies who he could rely on to guide him back to the straight and narrow. Xiangyu and his army was coming, and if he wanted to survive this impending confrontation, he had to take action soon. Oh, come on, we've got plenty of time. He's got to babysit 200,000 POWs. How fast can he get here? Report, sir! Xiangyu had blown through the gate of the Hanguguan Pass. He is coming with a combined army of 400,000. What? Nope, Liu Bang didn't have much time. What happened to his 200,000 Qin POWs? They were all killed. 200,000 is a massive number, and number in ancient battles often get conflated. But the fact remained that Xiangyu massacred all the defenseless soldiers under his watch just because he considered them to be a burden. It was a shocking news, but Liu Bang wasn't surprised. Xiangyu had a history of brutality. Before this, he had massacred whole cities. If Liu Bang doesn't do anything now, he would become another historical statistic. But how could he even stand a chance against the greatest warrior of the era? Besides, he only had 100,000 men. He can't win. But wait a minute. He may not have Xiangyu's martial prowess, but he had something he could use to overcome this trial. Or to be more accurate, it is something he didn't have. "Brother, I missed you, my dear sworn brother!" It was his sense of shame. "Who dared to close the Hanguguan gate on my dearest brother and keep him away from me? Who? Let me at him! Let me at him!" Liu Bang is shameless, and that's one of his superpowers. He also employed a tactic a proud aristocratic warrior like Xiang Yu is unfamiliar with: groveling. Following his strategist Fan Zheng's advice, Xiang Yu had actually prepared to assassinate Liu Bang on his signal. But now that he is bewitched by Liu Bang's godly charms and groveling, he ignored all of Fan Zheng's signals. Liu Bang had upheld the law and order of Shenyang and did not touch any of the riches in the treasury, all just to keep them safe for Xiang Yu to claim. He said, "It may seem like a proof of his loyalty, and it may have fooled everyone, but it rang Fan Zheng's alarm bells. It is a sign that Liu Bang had evolved from being a short-sighted peasant into a leader with foresight, who could resist powerful temptations. And if he's not moved by the mountain of wealth, then it could only mean that he is aiming for something much greater." Fan Zheng was convinced more than ever that he must get rid of Liu Bang now, before he festered into a greater threat. If his master won't act, then he will do it on his own. So they held a banquet in Liu Bang's honor, and as part of the attraction, Xiang Yu's cousin performed a sword dance. Kinda odd, Xiang Yu thought, since he would much prefer to see his beautiful consort Yu do the dance. But this was actually part of Fan Zheng's plan to kill Liu Bang by choreographical malfunction. But suddenly, Xiang Yu's uncle, Xiang Bo, joined the dance and used himself to cover Liu Bang. Xiang Bo was actually a close friend of Zhang Liang, Liu Bang's advisor, and he was persuaded to help Liu Bang the previous night. Overnight conversion. Godly charms, guys. But despite his effort, he can't keep up forever against his younger and stronger nephew. So Zhang Liang unleashed Fan Kui.
"Hey, what's the big idea? Why are you trying to kill my bro after all he's done for you?"
Fan Kui was Liu Bang's brother-in-law. He was a butcher and a warrior. Despite his rough demeanor, he was a straight talker and he could connect to Xiang Yu, warrior to warrior. Fan Kui rebuked Xiang Yu, saying that if he killed Liu Bang after demonstrating his loyalty, then he is no better than the tyrannical and corrupt Qin, who he hated so much. So apparently, Fan Kui pressed all the right buttons and his words froze Xiang Yu. After an extended period of silence, he told Fan Kui to sit down and join the party. Oh, wow! That was intense! It's cool now. I almost wet my pants. Whoops! Actually, let me go to the toilet to clean myself. Liu Bang's groveling had successfully established to everyone that he was a loyal follower of Xiang Yu, and he is not a threat. If Xiang Yu had him killed, then it would sow distrust among his own followers. But still, Xiang Yu could change his mind anytime. So, where is Liu Bang anyway? Apparently, Liu Bang had escaped when he pretended to go to the toilet. And so, to end the night, Fan Kui presented Xiang Yu with some parting gift, and they booked it out of there.
"You foolish child! You have doomed us all!"
Despite Fan Zheng's reaction, Xiang Yu still wasn't convinced that a pathetic worm like Liu Bang was a threat at all. A few days later, Xiang Yu and his men marched into Shenyang. He looted the population, executed the last king of Qin, and burned everything down. Not even the dead was spared. Over 2,000 years later, when archaeologists found the terracotta warriors, almost all of them were found to be broken, and all the weapons were looted. It was speculated that Xiang Yu's army were the culprit. The fire in Shenyang was said to have burned for 3 whole months. With Xiang Yu acting as de facto overlord, he divided the realm to his leisure into 18 kingdoms and ignored King Huai's promise to Liu Bang. Why would he listen to his puppet king anyway? Oh wait, King Huhai is technically the emperor now. Ha! But a puppet emperor is still a puppet. Consequently, Liu Bang was assigned the worst piece of land in the realm, Han. And to make it worse, 3 Qin generals who had surrendered to Xiangyu were placed near him to guard against his possible comeback. To further allay Xiangyu's suspicion, Liu Bang followed Zhang Liang's advice to burn the gallery road to Han, making it even more difficult to bring his army back. And that was the last piece of advice his advisor could give him before he had to return to the king of Han, since he was part of their aristocracy after all. But Zhang Liang wouldn't be the only one to leave him. The land of Han was so bad, even his soldiers started to desert him. And before he knew it, even his best friend and confidant, Xiao He, was nowhere to be found. Liu Bang was crushed. His dreams, his ambitions, everything seemed to be over for him. But then suddenly, Xiao He returned. Xiao He, where the heck were you? And he brought with him great news. He had to leave to chase down a deserter, and had succeeded to bring him back. Liu Bang did not appreciate this man's talent when he was in their army, and now it is time to change all that. This man is the key to their victory, Han Xin. Xiao He also had a confession to make. When he was told not to take anything from the Qin palace, he did not listen. No, he wasn't after money or jades. What he took were the maps and documents of Qin. With this intel and Han Xin, they can still win. In 206 BCE, dissatisfied with Xiangyu's arrangement, the state of Qi annexed its neighboring land, and the state of Zhao was formed. Xiangyu, distracted by the disturbance nearby, allowed Liu Bang's side to make their move. Han Xin had his soldiers pretend to fix the gallery road to attract the attention of the neighboring kingdoms. While their attention is glued to one side, Han Xin attacked from another direction. With Han Xin as the commander-in-chief of Liu Bang's army, he easily defeated the 3 Qins. In the future, Han Xin will be known as the greatest general of the era, but right now he still had a lot to prove. With the Qins gone, Liu Bang advanced into Guanzhong. Because Xiangyu had been ruling heavy-handedly, the king of Han was killed, and a series of events eventually led to Zhang Liang returning to Liu Bang, and this time he is staying for good. As if heaven itself was on his side, King Huhai, now Emperor Yi, died mysteriously. Whether Xiangyu was the murderer or not, it doesn't matter. Everyone was convinced that he did it. So Liu Bang gathered a coalition army in the name of justice, and his rank swelled to 560,000 men.
It's payback time, baby!
So in 205 BCE, Liu Bang advanced to Pengcheng and took Xiangyu's capital while he was quelling the rebellion at Qi. This is it! With this kind of overwhelming number, Liu Bang can't possibly lose. Xiangyu will be finished soon, he thought. But before that, it is time for family reunion and some early celebration. Which is always a bad idea, because Xiangyu, with a detachment of mere 30,000 soldiers, quickly rushed back to his capital. Catching the coalition off guard, he crushed and routed them. Liu Bang's army may be almost 20 times the size of Xiangyu's army, but the difference in quality between them was overwhelming. Liu Bang suffered the most embarrassing defeat in his life, and many of his family members were captured. During his escape, Xiangyu's men even saw something very scandalous that Liu Bang did. The disastrous defeat led to other kings deserting him, and some have even switched sides to Xiangyu. This war had become deeply personal for the two of them, and the stakes had become so high neither side is going to let up even as bodies started to pile up. Xiangyu's force was clearly superior to Liu Bang's, but no matter how many times he crushed the cockroach, he just kept returning with more men. Liu Bang had trustworthy men like Xiao He handling his logistics, brilliant strategists like Zhang Liang guiding him, and excellent generals like Han Xin, who's been winning wars up north and had started to encircle Xiangyu. Meanwhile, Xiangyu was getting isolated. His generals were bought over, and he had foolishly fallen for Liu Bang's trick and dismissed his advisor Fan Zheng. So in his desperation, Xiangyu decided to do something very uncharacteristic of himself. It is something cowardly even, and reached out to Liu Bang. In 204 BCE, on Guangwu Mountain, Liu Bang received an ultimatum from Xiang Yu.
Liu Bang, surrender now, or you will see your father get chopped up and cooked into soup.
Liu Bang's heart almost shattered as he saw his helpless father in Xiang Yu's grasp. He can't believe what he is seeing. Xiang Yu is brutal and cruel against his enemies, but is he really going to stoop so low and use his defenseless father as hostage? It looks like Xiang Yu finally got the upper hand now, but he knows that his plan is not foolproof. If that scandalous thing his soldier reported was true, then his plan would be ruined. So, what will Liu Bang do now? And what is that scandalous thing? How could Xiang Yu stoop so low? If he surrendered here, they would surely kill him. But is he really going to sacrifice his own father for his ambition? Even if he did, it would devastate his troops' morale. How could Xiang Yu force him to make this choice? And to think that they were even sworn brothers. Wait a minute. Sworn brothers? What? That's not the reaction Xiang Yu was expecting.
Xiang Yu, since we were sworn brothers, then my father is also your father. If you are so cruel that you would cook your own father, then could you please give me a bowl of the soup? I'll help carry some of the sin for you.
So, not only that Liu Bang was cold enough to sacrifice his own father, he is pushing the blame onto him. The scandal was true then, Xiang Yu thought. Not too long ago, when he defeated Liu Bang at Pengceng, his soldiers saw him through his own two children to lighten the load, repeatedly even, because his driver tried to pick the children up. He knew that Liu Bang was shameless, but he wasn't expecting the double whammy. He was also immoral. The sin of patricide would be pinned on him if he killed the old man. So in the end, Xiang Yu took Liu Bang's father back into custody. But Xiang Yu hasn't given up yet. The next day, he challenged Liu Bang to bring out his 3 strongest warriors to settle the war through armed combat. Liu Bang sent out an archer who shot at all 3 from a distance. Furious, Xiang Yu personally rode up to Liu Bang and challenged him to a duel. Now, Liu Bang could have just done the usual cowardly thing and refused the duel in the safety of his own keep, but he just couldn't resist rubbing salt into Xiang Yu's wounded pride. So he came up to him and listed all his alleged crimes over the years. He then proceeded by further insulting Xiang Yu that he was not even worthy to be killed by his own hands. He should be killed by a lowly convict soldier.
Hey!
Just kidding, 帅哥. I love you guys. And then instant karma. Xiang Yu's hidden archer shot Liu Bang. Liu Bang immediately fled. As he rode back to his keep, he shouted, "Oh no! I am shot in the toe!" Unless Liu Bang's feet grew out of his chest, that was a lie. But he had to say it to preserve his army's morale. And to allay further panic among the troops, his strategist, Zhang Liang, advised him to inspect his soldiers to keep up the facade, before he was moved to somewhere where he could find better treatment. But why was Liu Bang playing this stupid game with Xiang Yu anyway? Actually, he was trying to buy time, waiting for Han Xing's reinforcement to come. But he never did. While Liu Bang had been losing his battles and holding down Xiang Yu at best, Han Xing had been kicking ass up north and taking kingdoms. But now he is getting a little greedy, and he wanted to be made the king of Qi. Liu Bang was furious when he heard the request, but if he wanted any chance to win the war at all, he had no other choice but to grant him the title. And this was the start of the build-up of bad blood between the two. But Han Xing also received an offer from Xiang Yu to help his force, and if he had accepted it, he would be made the king of the whole northern region in a China that's divided into 3. He didn't know it at the time, but Han Xing was sitting in a very privileged position in history. because he get to decide the course of Chinese civilization for millennia to come. As for him, the pertinent question was, is it better to be a significant regional player in a tripartite China destined for conflict, or a minor king in a unified China under Liu Bang? By 203 BCE, both Liu Bang and Xiangyu were exhausted by the constant war, but Xiangyu's side were also having the problem of food shortage. So when Liu Bang initiated a peace negotiation, Xiangyu was willing to come to the table. After a few rounds of discussion, they agreed to divide China into two. And as part of the agreement, Liu Bang's family members were returned to him. Finally, everyone gets to go home now. Psych, it's actually time to attack! So Liu Bang attacked Xiangyu the moment his army turned their backs. Liu Bang was already known to have no shame and no morals, so why would he even care for his honor? For now, all he needed to do was to win. But he lost. It wasn't completely his fault though, because Xiangyu was the greatest warrior of the era, and his elite battle-hardened soldiers had defeated armies almost 20 times larger than itself. Additionally, Liu Bang's reinforcement, including Han Xing, refused to come to his aid. Liu Bang had to offer more prestigious titles to his subordinates and expand Han Xing's domain to finally solidify their support. He will just have to save the grudge for later. After this hiccup, he finally managed to gather an army of 500,000 against Xiangyu's 100,000. That about evens it up, Xiangyu thought, since he had won against greater odds anyway in the past. But the greatest warrior of the era miscalculated one thing. His opponent was the greatest general of the era. The difference between the two is that while Han Xing could not perform battlefield miracles like Xiangyu, the great general never chooses to fight a battle he could not win. So the course of history was set the moment Han Xing picked his side on the battlefield of Kaixia. Despite some initial successes, Xiangyu suffered his devastating first defeat. But not all was lost, because he was able to return to camp with half of his army. Han Xing's men had the camp surrounded, but he was not stupid enough to provoke a cornered beast. So Zhang Liang came up with a plan. In the middle of the night, he climbed onto a hill and played his flute. What followed was a chorus of Chu song, sang from all four corners by soldiers who were also Chu natives. The lyrics of the song claimed that their homeland, Chu, was already conquered, which was a lie, and they will not be harmed if they surrendered. This psychological warfare proved to be extremely effective, and it led to mass desertion by Xiangyu's army. Soon, only 800 men were left in the camp. This turn of event devastated Xiangyu. Luck had deserted him. He lost not because he wasn't a great warrior, but it was heaven's will, he said to himself. Thinking that the war was lost and not wanting to become a burden for his escape, Xiangyu's consort, Yu, took her own life. Xiangyu cried bitterly over her death. Not wanting to let her sacrifice go to waste, after burying her in a makeshift grave, Xiangyu and his 800 warriors rode out of their camp and broke through the encirclement. Under the direct orders of Liu Bang, 5,000 cavalrymen pursued him, and the reward for his head was 10,000 caddies of gold and the title of Marquis. Since we are talking about history here, we know that this is a doomed flight that will lead to his legendary last stand. Within the year, Liu Bang would complete his conquest, become the emperor, and establish the Han Dynasty, one of China's golden ages. But had the Battle of Kaixia gone differently, we could see a very different China today. The empire's policies in this time period would often be directly influenced by the personalities of the respective rulers. Usually, someone's true nature is revealed in times of crisis. Even when pursued by 5,000 cavalrymen, Xiangyu did not abandon his warriors. More than once, he personally rode into the enemy's battle formation, killed the general, and cut down the flag to break them out of encirclement. He valued his comrade in arms more than anything, and he was willing to lead by example. So a China under Xiangyu would probably be a very hands-on militaristic empire. And in a divided China, it is unlikely that violence-averse philosophies like Confucianism would gain prominence. At the same time, it is unlikely that common peasants would thrive under him, as the farmer who misdirected him when he was lost would probably know. Under Liu Bang's reign, he reduced taxes, government spending, and gradually warmed up to Confucianism. Xiangyu was a brutal leader who killed hundreds and thousands of Qin prisoners of war, but it didn't mean that he was a terrible ruler for the Chu people. He was jealous of competition, but he was kind to his subordinates and people under him. When he had the chance to get away by crossing the river on a boat, the shame of facing the family of the 8,000 warriors who joined his first campaign prevented him to board, because none of his original comrades in arms survived. So instead, he let his loyal warhorse board the boat and turned to face his hundreds of pursuers with his last few remaining men. And when he saw his end was coming, he recognized one of his former friend and subordinate among the crowd of enemy soldiers. Knowing about the hefty reward that comes with his head, he singled him out and gifted him the reward. But the ensuing scramble turned savage, as every soldier tried to claim a piece for themselves. Consequently, Xiangyu's remain was torn to 5 parts, and the holder of each piece was made marquis. Liu Bang, on the other hand, was willing to cooperate with others, regardless of their background. To prove it, he even granted his old nemesis, Yongci, a title, begrudgingly of course. None of Xiangyu's family members were harmed either. I guess you could say that this is the difference between a king and an emperor. A king rules for a nation, but an emperor rules for everyone. But of course, Liu Bang wasn't a saint either. He plotted against anyone who threatened his rule, including the 3 heroes of the early Han Dynasty. Han Xing was killed, Xiao He was jailed briefly, and Zhang Liang, who was smart enough to read the situation, retired to become an ascetic. Before I end the video, let me pose a question for you. If you were Han Xing, disregarding the way he died under Liu Bang, would you have chosen differently and put us on a different historical trajectory? And as usual, comment and share the video if you've been entertained by it. And until next time, stay cool, my bros.